everyone, welcome back to another video. So in the intro montage of this episode, I knocked out the fuel pump bracket, or the mounting bracket for the SC, and also finished up the sump for the fuel tank. Now the car is up in the air, which we'll go over why here in a moment, but the fuel sump rack, or the sump wrap up rather, was completed with this number 12 ORB bung put into place here on the bottom of the sump. So now that will allow fuel to actually exit the tank from the new feed port, and everything is good to go on the bottom side of the tank here. So there's still a few modifications that need to be done on this tank, which we won't get into in this episode, but we'll go over them in the near future, get the tank 100% squared away, and figure out what materials that we need to knock out the rest of the fuel system on the Lexus. So why is the Lexus back up in the air? Why is the Mark II on the ground? Why are we doing a little bit of shop reorganization? Well, I'm excited to say that Russ's beautiful RSP Mark IV Supra is out in the trailer, and it's back for some pretty interesting modifications and updates, additions, so on and so forth. We're going to do some more work on it, but first I need to get the car in the shop, which involves moving the Mark II underneath of the SC, so that way this bay right here can be Russ's for at least the immediate future as we knock out the work on his car. So without further ado, let's go ahead, play some car shuffle, and let's get his car in the shop and then talk about what we're doing to it. really cool to see this car back in the shop again, and it is as beautiful as ever. So if you guys are not familiar with this beautiful RSP Mark IV Supra behind me, either somewhere on the screen right now, or if you go into the playlists on the channel, you can see the entire build series for this car. All of the titanium work, all of the crazy stuff that went into it, it all came together as one very beautiful, harmonious package, and I'm very happy to have been able to play a role in this. But a quick rundown, it is a 3.4 liter 2JZ Garrett G45 1600 turbo, one of my Gen R T4 twin scroll exhaust manifolds, and a whole lot of titanium work. All of the titanium work, or pretty much all of it under the hood, at least as far as the tube work, this intake tube, intercooler tube, the hot side intercooler tubes you can see right there, the downpipe and recirculated wastegate dump tubes, all of that is stuff that I did during the build series. And like I said, you can see all of it as a step-by-step throughout the that playlist that I talked about earlier. But since the car has been here, Russ obviously got the car running. You can see some of his really cool work with these titanium hard lines for the wastegate, the actual pressure reference lines there. There is one right here for the coolant overflow, and you can also see a lot of the beautiful colors that have made themselves very readily apparent in the downpipe as it is heat cycled. So why is the car back, you may be asking? Well, we're going to do some other modifications to it, and after Russ and I talked, he has a pretty cool idea of a modification to do to the exhaust, so that way it can be both sedate and aggressive if he wants it to be. And that is going to be accomplished by this guy right here. So if you guys are not familiar with what this piece is, this is an electric cutout. So Russ did some modification to it, but this is a piece from, or available from, Tycon Industries. And essentially what this is an electronic valve that goes in the exhaust. As power is applied to the motor, it will either open or close, and if it's in line with the exhaust, well, wherever you place it, the exhaust will open up at that point, and you can bypass mufflers and do all kinds of pretty cool and pretty trick stuff with it. OEs use these fairly frequently nowadays for sport mode or something along those lines in their exhaust systems. And these parts are readily available to include them in exhaust builds that you're doing for any of your project cars. So what we're going to be doing here is putting this electric cutout somewhere downstream in Russ's exhaust, and with all of the tubing that you can see through here, as always, all Tycon Industries stuff. But we're going to set up an electric cutout provision so that Russ, by the push of a button on his Haltech CAN keypad, can open this up, have the car be loud and aggressive and everything else, or he can close it so that way he can cruise sedately and enjoy kind of just a nice relaxed cruise that way. So in getting underneath of Russ's car and taking a little bit of a look around here, I think the most logical place to tie in, at least with the initial cutout provision, is somewhere in this area right here. As if we would put it in between the two mufflers, well, it doesn't really accomplish what we're after with this. If the cutout's open, we want it to be loud and aggressive and kind of in your face. And if we put it here where it's already where it already has gone through a muffler, well, it doesn't really accomplish what we're after that way. So I think we'll come off of this little bit of a bend right here and run a tube out and over somewhere in this area. And one thing I'll have to be cognizant of is the placement of the cutout valve itself, so Russ can easily run wiring to it. This car he cares a great deal about, and he really does not want to drill additional holes in the car. And frankly, he is not going to drill other holes in the car, I guess would be the proper way to phrase it. So when I talked to him earlier today, the idea with this is to find where the ABS wiring is somewhere on the hub here and trace that up to wherever the grommet is in the chassis, as he'll use that as the pass-through for the wires for the cutout. So I'll have to remain cognizant of that as I place everything and get everything located, but I don't think that will be the end of the world, no big deal. So the first thing that we need to do is to put our angle, our coped bend rather, on the outside of this radius on the mid pipe, and that will give us a good idea of how this is going to run, how everything is going to fit together, and will allow us to build forward from there. first section of Russ's cutout provisioning is all welded together. Actually, the first couple of sections, I should say. So we have this coped section that actually goes on the side of the exhaust, and then we have the first section of the actual bolt-on, or what will be the bolt-on slash clamp-on cutout provision that the cutout will actually be housed in. So, like we said earlier, this whole deal is going to go pretty much from here and then work its way rearwards. So at this point, I need to figure out where exactly on the exhaust tube this branch is going to be located. And once I do that, I can mark everything out, drop the mid pipe, cut a hole, so on and so forth. Long story short, I can get this coped stub put onto the mid pipe, and then at that point in time, the mid pipe can go back on for good, and I can focus just on this section with the bend and craft the actual bolt-on cutout section, and we'll be pretty well good to go at that point. Now let's go ahead and actually build the rest of Russ's electric cutout setup. So now that we have the actual provision on the side of the mid-pipe in place, as well as this first little stub piece tying into the V-band and everything else, I can now run the tube rearwards and figure out where the cutout is going to be located, where the outlet is going to be located, and so on and so forth. So I did a little bit of off-camera trimming to this little bit of a bend that's on this beginning of this provision. And that allows me, or I trimmed it such that the tube runs in an advantageous location, so the cutout, or the electric cutout valve and the tip will be in the location that I want them to be. So at this point I need to figure out what the length of straight tubing that I need off of this bend is and where it needs to terminate, so the cutout can actually be housed kind of in this pocket right here. Up farther on the chassis, you can't see it right now because it's dark, but up there on the chassis is where the wires come through that run over to the ABS sensor on this hub over here. Like I said earlier, I don't want Russ to have to drill another hole into this car, and we discussed doing that earlier, and it's something that he is not interested in. So the cutout is going to be in this location here. We'll provide a nice path upwards, so that way the wires can be tied in and the cutout will actually work. So at this point it should be fairly simple. I'll hold the cutout up here, measure out a length of straight, cut it off of our remaining straight tube right there, and then it'll be time for our next welding session. First section of Russ's cutout is completed. So we have from the initial provision out to the cutout itself, and now I need to figure out how to craft the tip section. So in doing this, I want to have the outlet of this be somewhere around the rear subframe, kind of in this area, and I don't want it to protrude very far past the subframe. I'll probably get it just below the fuel tank, so that way from the rear of the car it isn't extremely highly visible, as Supras traditionally just have the exhaust coming out of the left-hand side, or in the US, the driver's side of the car. So I don't want to have another highly visible exhaust over on this side, so we'll have to be cognizant of that in building this tip section. So I have a leftover portion of bend over on the cart there. I have the straight tube with a pretty aggressive miter cut on this side, and I also have 2 extra 3.5-inch 90-degree bends. So between all of these materials, I should be able to come up with something that looks aesthetically pleasing, will function well, not burn the fuel tank, so on and so forth. Today's the day that we finish up Russ's cutout section. So yesterday I got the whole body and everything of it completed, and the only outstanding item at this point in time is a hanger. Since we have this whole branch that comes off the side of the main exhaust, I want to put some sort of a hanger on it, so that way we don't have just this random offshoot of tubing hanging in space just under its own weight. In addition to that, if I put a hanger over to this factory hanger location right here, well, it's just going to make the exhaust that much more sturdy and that much more stable on the car. So to do so, we have a couple of these really nice billet titanium hanger rods from Tycon, of course. This one's obviously out of the bag. And here's this one right here. If you guys want the part number or anything, there is all of that information. And this should be pretty straightforward, pretty simple. So what we're going to do is put this hanger rod just into there. I'll have to do a little bit of bending over on this side just to have it meet the contour of the exhaust. And then with the other hanger rod, I'll cut this mushroom head section off of it, so that way I have essentially a piece of titanium bar stock, and I'll bend that so that way the hanger is reinforced. It'll tie into both the top and bottom sides of the tubing, and by the time everything's said and done, it will look something like this one right here. So let's go ahead and get that knocked out, and then I guess we can finally hear what this thing sounds like with the cutout open, I should say. just like that, Russ's electric cutout setup is now completed. So this came out very nicely. I'm very happy with the end result. We have our hanger over here. The whole cutout provision, cutout section is all in here. And I made this rudimentary little temporary harness so that way we can lower this car down, start it up, and hear what it sounds like. So with that being said, let's do just that and see what this wild Supra sounds like uncorked. And there we have it. With just the flip of a switch, or what will be the flip of a switch, we go from nice and reasonably sedate to screaming and very aggressive. And that's a pretty cool feature to have on a car like this. So once again, very happy with the way that this electric cutout setup has came together. And I hope that Russ likes it as well. From the back of the car, we look maybe about the point that you'd be looking at the back of the car from, you can just see a little bit of the cutout tip there, and that's what we were going for. As hidden as possible and as clean and functional as possible. And I think that we accomplished that perfectly well. So now that we've heard what the car sounds like, both through the mufflers and uncorked with the cutout, I think that's a good place to leave off with this episode, and that still leaves us plenty to do in the next episode with this car. So with that being said, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. So thank you guys, as always, for coming along on all these different journeys and all of these different adventures with me. I'm very happy to have Russ's car back in the shop, to have the opportunity to do more work on it, and also to have my Mark IV out getting its Haltech installed, and that will be back here very shortly. But we still have some work to do on Russ's car. I have to knock out the crankcase breather setup next, so that's what the subject of next week's episode will be, and that should be a pretty cool one. It's a part that I haven't built before, and we'll all go through it and all learn together. But with all that being said, that will be about the end of this one. So as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, check out the website for manifolds, for merch, for all things good that way, including my new MCB collection drop. That will be available later this month, and it's something I'm very excited about, and I hope that you guys are as well. But with all of that being said, that will be the end of this episode, and I will see you guys in the next one.